First of all, happy birthday to Oxy. I want to also thank President Veach for inviting me here and for conferring this great honor here. I've always dreamt of getting a doctorate. Thank you for waiving matriculation. It's exactly the advantage I needed. I could never have done it the old-fashioned way. Anyway, greetings to the class of 2014 and esteemed faculty, trustees, family members, and friends that have come in support of this class. And I'm very happy to share the stage with Jonathan Gold and Odessa Woolfolk. It's such a really interesting crop of honorees, very well curated. I'm also very proud that my discipline, architecture, is acknowledged among the liberal arts. I mean, something that we always fight with. Architecture is culture, it's not just a profession. It's really a great privilege to be on this campus designed by one of the nation's most prolific architects, Myron Hunt, who's responsible for making the spaces of every single Occidental student that every single one of you has worked in, played in, studied in, and slept in. 19 buildings on campus have survived all these years, mostly unaltered, and its longevity speaks itself in some way to our disposable culture of architectural consumption. I'm also very honored to be in this place that Beatrix Ferrand conceived as a wonderful landscape. Each successive class has graduated in her environment, and she was a great early pioneer of landscape architecture, inspiring many future generations, especially of women in this field. And of course, she designed many campuses, to follow around the country. And architecture and landscape, I have to say, make a huge difference in education, physically and subliminally. Environment sets the stage for intellectual endeavor. I learned an interesting factoid the other day that your photogenic campus has been the location for something like 80 movie shoots and television shows from Star Trek to Glee. Myron and Beatrix would have enjoyed this ultimate cultural validation of their work. So I have to admit, this is my first commencement address, and it's ironic that I accepted the invitation. I've always spurned these ceremonies. I almost didn't attend my own graduation at Cooper Union, and in the succeeding 9 years of teaching at my alma mater, and followed by 23 years of teaching at Princeton, I haven't gone to a single commencement. And so this is a big leap for me. And I thought long and hard about why, and I attributed it to what I think four things. First, I have some true reservations about punctuating one's education with a period, or even a comma, or a colon. We all know that education happens despite school. I'm a professor, I could say that. In a cynical view, graduation is an accounting milestone agreed upon by higher education consensus that decides how many credit hours are required to qualify a student to complete college and enter the world. School doesn't prepare you for the world. Actually, it's better. School prepares you for education, and that is life. To extend the grammatic metaphor, maybe the punctuation should be left off of what is ultimately a run-on sentence. My other three reasons are perhaps even more idiosyncratic. I have a general aversion to sentimentality and a very short threshold for getting choked up. I also have qualms about the motivational speech genre. So if you expect me to say something important, I probably won't. My MO is to instill doubt into students' minds, to push them to think critically and question received assumptions, to make them uncomfortable with what they think they know. And this is in order to brainwash them, of course. Not maybe exactly the right tone of the day. The last reason for my defiance toward graduation is an anxiety about the regalia and the ritual associated with it. I have a phobia of pomp and circumstance. So with all of my issues, when President Veach invited me to speak, I first thought to say no way. And then I decided I could use this as an opportunity for some therapy, I guess. So on this way to self-help, I had to think hard about the psychodrama surrounding my own graduation. Unfinished coursework, exploding personal issues. I seem to relive this anxiety like every several months in my dreams. I don't think I'm alone. One of the top 5 recurring dreams in adulthood is not being able to graduate because you haven't completed your requirements and you have to repeat your senior year. According to Dr. Oz, this is how I do my research, even if you graduated 10, 20, or 50 years ago, your dreaming mind keeps pulling you back to school. School is such a popular dream locale because the dynamics of the school setting continue on into your career and into your social life. But never mind about your future nightmares. You are graduating. It's a great day of release despite the stress. It's a day of awkward introductions, sweaty hugs, and inadequate goodbyes. Dads meeting boyfriends, moms meeting professors, families meeting families. How many dumb jokes and uncomfortable silences will you have to endure today? How many times will you have to answer the question, what are you doing next? Will you hug your favorite professors goodbye or shake hands or dare ask for their friendship on Facebook? Today is the day of ceaseless navigation of the intersocial. You are in mission control of your small universe. How you do today is an indicator of how well your social radar has been honed. As you listen to endless speeches, what are your wandering thoughts? These are some recollections from a couple of young architects I canvassed in my studio just before I left. So, quote, "These robes look so much more substantial when you see other people wearing them on stage. They're actually kind of see-through and cheap." Who are all these people? Where are we all going? Who's going to make it? Is it true that what so many people say, that college is the best 4 years of your life? Is it over after this? Have I peaked already, or will it get better? How will I pay off my college loans? Right hand shake, left hand diploma, and don't trip on the stage. When the president asks family and friends to kindly refrain from applause as each graduate is named and presented a diploma, what if Grandma Sylvia can't help herself and when she hears my name, gets up on her chair and starts cheering and clapping uncontrollably? How will I gracefully ditch the family after the meal so I can celebrate with my friends? If I could only sleep for a month, then I'll really be ready to change the world. Exactly, how am I going to pack up my belongings in a giant U-Haul within 24 hours? By the way, a lot of the comments that I got are censored. So, here's one. When I walk out of here, I can achieve absolutely anything. I just wish I knew what I wanted to achieve. But at least the world feels open and full of possibilities. I feel at once so motivated and so lost. And I'm sure this last wandering thought strikes a chord with many of you. Can you really be expected to have your lives mapped out by graduation? You may know what you're good at, what your parents have in mind for you, what your professors, what professions have a shortage, What's an appealing lifestyle, and if you're lucky, what will challenge and motivate you? You may defer until grad school or after a year of work or travel abroad. But how and when do you really know what you really want to do? And you know, the possibility of that aligning with graduation is not very high. Very few people nail it early. Most bumble their way through the first year to see what sticks. The first years, I should say. I, for one, ended up doing what I thought I absolutely despised. My parents, fearing that I would end up as a starving artist — I was a devoted experimental film person when I was in art school — my parents pushed me to be an architect. Architecture would allow me to channel my creative energies into a respected profession. I had zero interest in architecture, no aptitude for math or physics. I couldn't even think in 3D. I was interested in 2D and time-based media. Why would I think about career while in school, while I was doing what I loved, telling stories through a lens? I guess at that point, I never saw a correlation between education and career. It was just one thing you did, and then you thought about the next. Well, after 3 years in the art school at Cooper, a funny thing happened. I took a class called architectonics, and that was in the School of Architecture. This word, architectonics, intrigued me. Nobody knew what it meant. I actually never quite figured it out. But what caught my interest had little to do with designing buildings. I was interested in building ideas. There was a discourse among architects that didn't exist in the art school. Your inspirations had to be situated in relation to the discipline and to contemporary culture. You had to defend your ideas that were always under attack, and I thrived in that environment. This led to taking more classes in architecture and slowly advancing to seeing the world in 2.5D. Eventually, I ended up switching majors from art to architecture, but never with the intention of being an architect or making buildings. And while the discipline of architecture was fascinating to me, I believe the profession of architecture was intellectually bankrupt and morally corrupt. I was interested in space, though. I wanted to interrogate social conventions of space, conventions so obvious to us that we are blinded to them by their familiarity. I was interested in space as it relates to issues of power and gender, space of the public and private, and space in relation to a range of media like film, installation art, and performance. For most of these interests, I took stimulation from the art world, yet processed through the rigorous intellectual framework of architecture. I took a couple of extra years to get through architecture school, and I hadn't told my parents I changed majors. I just couldn't give them the satisfaction. But as I never intended to go to my graduation, I thought I could keep my cover. But my parents were heartbroken when I told them that we were not going to graduation. As immigrants from Europe, having sacrificed everything to put their kids through school, this was a landmark moment for them. So reluctantly, I went and suffered through every moment. My parents found out that I was an architect when my name was called to the stage to pick up my diploma. They were totally confused. But it was a day of first. I had to improvise an outfit. I only owned pants and sneakers. They would have to invite my boyfriend to lunch, who they would learn, along with everyone else, was my teacher. I was really bad. But this was true love, no impropriety. The day was full of stress, coming out in every way. And to cap the drama, I might as well break the news to my parents that despite the degree, I had no intention of being an architect. I didn't want to be a problem solver. I wanted to be a problem generator. I was not a person of science and reason. I was a person of emotion and intuition, and most of all, defiance. Nevertheless, they knew I saw the light. And in their infinite wisdom, they did not put up a fight, but they knew I would come around at some point. So several years later, engaged in my form of practice, I was a misfit in architecture. Not because I was a woman in a man's field, but because I was a border crosser. I did not fit neatly into any discipline, but squarely between the cracks of many. There was no infrastructure around me. I had no clients and no patrons and no context to operate in. I had to make my own context and my own way of working. I had to find grants to teach. I had to go into deep credit card debt to buy materials for short-term interventions on borrowed or stolen sites. Guerrilla style. It was very important for me to build stuff out in the public realm. The work varied from interrogations about surveillance and modernist glass to treatises on housework and the metrics of Taylorism to optical engineering and tourism to the culture of vision. There were many topics. Soon I became we when my partner Ricardo and I joined forces. Another strike actually against me. Architecture was typically done by lone heroes. Collaborations were frowned upon. Anyway, we spent our time throwing architectural grenades at the establishment from afar, particularly institutions like the museum. And then something interesting happened. Our little dissident practice became known for its resistance to the status quo, and we were commissioned by most of the major museums in the US and all over Europe to make new projects. And we did that for like 15 years. And then came the first commission to design a museum. That was really kind of a trauma. All of a sudden, we had to consider how to retain our independent voice, our independent critical voice, while speaking in the voice of the institution. And eventually, we became comfortable living or having both voices, living on both sides of the wall, and playing out that debate architecturally. Our studio doubled in size. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, became 16, then 32. We invited our third partner, Charles, who broke the symmetry. Then came the totally unexpected. We were asked to do 2 of the most important urban transformations in New York, both surgical interventions into existing urban structures and logics. It's very rare that an architect is given an opportunity to make a change in one's own city. Usually, you have to succeed elsewhere. And then sometimes, if you're really successful, you get invited back. Our redesign of much of Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, a 16-acre campus, was guided by an ethos to dismantle the elitism of this Acropolian site and to democratize the arts, to turn the campus inside out and bring culture to the streets and public spaces for unticketed visitors who could not afford the price of a seat at the Metropolitan Opera. We aimed to finally make good on the publicness of Lincoln Center's public spaces, to fix the urban planning miscalculations once made for suburban car culture, so that we could respond to a new set of socioeconomic conditions. This decade-long project required a synthesis of urban planning, architecture, landscape design, interiors, information design, all of which we had to do seamlessly. The High Line, another a decade-long project, is a 1.5-mile-long urban park built on an obsolete industrial railway 30 feet above New York City streets. The High Line was designed as a lung for the city. It became one of the most popular attractions in New York, so popular that it became viral. It inspired close to 36 similar efforts all over the world, from London to Mexico City to Jerusalem, Singapore, Shenzhen, Lima, Seoul, Madrid, Rio, and on and on. We somehow created some kind of, or the so-called High Line effect, and this is evidence of a new chapter in sustainability, the adaptive reuse not only of buildings, but also of highways, viaducts, tunnels, and bridges. Architecture can be an instrument of positive change, even with existing flawed logics. Right now, we're building a town for 5,000 factory workers in the Pearl River Delta in China. At first glance, why would an architect step into an industrial culture that abuses labor under inhumane conditions? In this case, the client is a humanitarian who, by integrating cultural and educational programming with production in the factory, aims to turn over blue-collar workers into the white-collar workforce within 3 years. Before that, it would have been hopeless for them, basically stuck in manual labor. Architecture is a big part of the solution, literally weaving together work, cultural, educational, and leisure spaces on that campus. And we work with some of the same institutions we used to actively critique, like the Museum of Modern Art. In early years, I thought the only way to make change was to rally against the man, but from the outside, via institutional critique. But what I've learned over the years is that you can make big and lasting impact by working from the inside, with a stealthy and critical voice. For example, we recently decided to take on the design of a 30-acre park directly in front of the Kremlin, right in front of Red Square in Moscow. We felt that we could hold a line between celebrating the history of the site and celebrating the authority associated with it. We will be making a pathless park that allows the public to wander and assemble freely in stark contrast to the regimented grandeur of Red Square. The park is for the people, with built-in climatically enhanced landscape features, so we can get winter in summer and summer in winter, which encourages Muscovites to claim ownership of the space year-round, day and night. Projects that appear morally dubious at first glance may be camouflaging radical progressive ideas. I never thought of myself as a leader, and all of a sudden I'm running a studio of 100 architects and designing buildings and public spaces in China, Brazil, Russia, and maybe the most exotic place of all, Los Angeles. The Broad on Grand Avenue. This is a huge challenge in urbanization in a centerless city. And I'm a student of Reyner Banham. I read him very much when I was a student about taking pleasure in centerlessness, but somehow I feel a compunction in helping LA to actually transform from a car culture to a semi-pedestrian culture. It might be a couple of lifetimes, but it will happen. I measure success not in dollars, but in civic achievements and in having a positive effect on the way people live, work, and interact. In addition to being responsive to expressed needs, I'm also pushing the agency of the architect to be more entrepreneurial, to create new paradigms for institutions and new economic structures to sustain them. There is a lot for architecture to do. Technology is changing the way we understand space. Material science is a new frontier for building. The global economy is changing the nature of the way we work, of the day-night cycle, which has a dramatic effect on the way we live, and the very notion of community. There are so many critical issues for architecture to help resolve, connected to the unprecedented speed of global urbanization, which challenges the very concept of a city, the conventions of density and housing, mobility, connectivity, physical infrastructure, health, and sustainability. For me, teaching is a way to play out some of these scenarios and a necessary extension of our work, as our studio is fundamentally a research practice. The dichotomy of the real world and the protected world of academia is breaking down, and that's a very good thing, as productive links are being forged between research, policy, and industry to address the challenging global problems of cities and environment. Architecture can tap into a new civic imagination in which informal bottom-up strategies can replace top-down development. Thomas Edison's adage about innovation being 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration applies perfectly to architecture. Innovation is largely the result of hard work rather than an inspired flash of insight. But I could say that the 99%, the sweaty part, is just as creative as the lightning bolt. Being able to build consensus, to educate the public, to move policymakers, to step out of comfort zones. This is the work of creative minds. And a little bit of optimistic naivete plays a key role here. Our work is a constant weave of varied projects in a variety of media and scales. We're doing 2 operas, 2 books, 2 curatorial projects, along with several museums, university buildings, concert halls, and other buildings. We're also working collaboratively with economists, meteorologists, robotics engineers, software designers, visual artists, composers, filmmakers, choreographers, statisticians, and writers. Looking back, I was once acting solo. Now my life is intricately connected to thousands of people on a broad range of social, economic, and cultural initiatives. This is the life of an architect. So from dismissing architecture out of ignorance and defiance, to unintentionally majoring in it, to unwittingly practicing it and then coming to terms with it, I have ultimately come to embrace architecture, to live it and to breathe it. My parents planted the seed, school exposed me to knowledge, chance took me the next step, hard work brought me the rest of the way. Life is strange that way. Things have a curious, magical way of building on one another, and you can't quite know where you're going until you get there. I suppose you could plan it, but it wouldn't be organic and dangerous and full of life-changing U-turns. And even if you plan it, you will probably end up somewhere unexpected anyway. I think back on my arrogance about my own graduation and regret I didn't savor the memories, however fraught with ambivalence and angst, and I regret I didn't step out of my doubt to enjoy the collective rite of passage. I guess this therapy has worked. But now you, like most transitions in life, one looks both to the past and to the future. As you look back on how you got here, the friends you've made, the hard work you've done over the past 4 years, and you look ahead at what your role can be in a future that is full of uncertainty, in a world of political turmoil, a precarious economy, and an ecological decline, I hope you can stop to think about the present, the now, this moment, this ritual to be shared with your faculty, family, and friends. In the short time before President Veach officially changes your status in the world, think about this moment of the hyper-present. Now, May 18th, 2014, my iPhone tells me it's 10:22. Think about this moment stretched out in slow-mo. You're wearing a black polyester sheet over your body with a matzah on top of your head. It's a moment of ritualized conformity. Just beneath that gown, you're wearing a suit or a dress in respect to your parents or your faculty, or you're wearing shorts and flip-flops or nothing at all in defiance of traditions, or just sheer comfort. What you've chosen to wear between your skin and that black robe is an early indicator of how you will play by the rules or not. There you sit in your flappy medieval dress. I see there's a cheat sheet in the program here of what it all means. You probably want nothing more than for this speech to be over and for the long list of diplomas dispersed, I'm almost there, so that you can really spring free from this ceremony. This rite of passage, however, is designed to slow you down. This is a scary moment of in-betweenness, between operating in a safe institutional environment, sheltered by a network of teachers, families, and clubs. You're entering a world with no safety net. Exposed, vulnerable, survival is left to your own devices. It's a moment of in-between, between a social system of classmates and faculty assembled around you for the last time before everyone disperses for the summer and forever, maybe. And the new friendships yet unknown and that will take time to cultivate in the future. There you sit, lightly perspiring inside of yards of flowing polyester. Your awareness is heightened. The sun is brighter and warmer than usual. You can feel the hardness of the chairs behind your back. In this moment of the in-between, you sit between two strangers, your alphabetical neighbors. One will precede you and one will follow you, and you may never see each other again. This stretched out moment of in-betweenness is fleeting. This is a moment that should be savored. This is the only advice I'm really going to give you. It's a moment between being a student and being a graduate, between knowledge and action. All the criteria by which you measure success are about to change. There you sit, perspiring, under your hilarious clerical robes, with tiny UFOs hovering over your beaming faces. You will await the announcement of your name, full of pride, excitement, fear, joy, embarrassment, boredom, anxiety, and hopefully optimism. The potential energy in this amphitheater is palpable and infectious. It's the reason we're all gathered here today. We are celebrating your achievement as we usher you forth into a world desperately in need of repair. If Occidental College has fulfilled its mission of molding you into interdisciplinary collaborative community, minded citizens that you are educated to be, you will be prepared for the challenges of not merely fitting into the world, but interrogating that world and improving it. And while you sit draped under your cavernous gowns, it is your last moment to take comfort in this institutional skin. In a short moment, you will pick up your diploma, you will have a different status and a new identity in the world. The persistent burden of homework, tuition, and academic expectation will finally be behind you, and the bruising responsibilities of adulthood await around the corner. You will need to translate your new credentials into food, shelter, and a meaningful contribution to the world. But for today, at least, enjoy the weightlessness, the zero gravity of the in-between. Thank you.